Please be upstanding for the opening prayer. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to vouchsafe Thy blessing upon this council, direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of Thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the Whittlesea City Council. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be Thy name. Thy kingdom be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Before we continue with the meeting, it's important to note that this meeting is being conducted primarily through live stream as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic response. It is also the first ordinary council meeting whilst an administrator has been appointed. The councillors of the City of Whittlesea were dismissed by an Act of State Parliament in March. The administrator has been appointed on an interim basis for 90 days, and at the end of that time it is expected that a panel of 3 administrators will be appointed. The panel of administrators will undertake the role of the council until the October 2024 elections. I would now like to hand over to our administrator, Lydia Wilson.
Thank you, Acting CEO. On behalf of the City of Whittlesea, I recognise the rich Aboriginal heritage of this country and acknowledge the Wurundjeri Willem clan as the traditional owners of this place. I would also like to personally acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. Could I, at the outset of this meeting, make a tribute to David Turnbull? On behalf of staff and our community, I would like to express our deep sadness at the recent passing of former Chief Executive Officer, colleague and friend, Mr. David Turnbull. I would also like to pass on my personal sadness, as Mr. Turnbull was a professional colleague of mine over many years. David started working at Council in 1994 as Director of Planning, and he played a pivotal role in shaping the City of Whittlesea as we know it today, leading the organisation from 2009 to 2016. As a planner, the Quarry Hills Parkland project was his crowning achievement and legacy. It's this textbook case of enabling development with a net community benefit outcome through the assembly and protection of 1,000 hectares of significant land in public ownership. David was an honourable man, a man of principle. He was a compassionate man. He cared for his staff and he cared for the community. He cared for proper governance and integrity in planning and council operations. He was a local government man through and through, and a strong leader and advocate on a multiplicity of issues of concern to Whittlesea communities and businesses. David was greatly respected by staff and the community alike for his calm and considered approach, even under the most challenging of circumstances. This was particularly evident during the 2009 Victorian bushfires, when David demonstrated leadership of the highest order during the biggest event to impact the City of Whittlesea. A pioneer in growing the role of local government advocacy, he was instrumental in the establishment of the Interface Group of Councils, the Interface Growth Fund and the National Growth Areas Alliance, which deliver significant federal and state government policy and funding outcomes for all of Melbourne's growth areas. David has left a remarkable legacy of leadership and achievement on our city and will be greatly missed. We extend our sincere condolences to his wife Suzanne and his children Tessa, Tom, Alice and Angus. I would now like to turn to a matter which is very much at the front of all our minds, the response to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, and specifically the response from the City of Whittlesea. Therefore, I resolve to suspend standing orders to bring item 6.5.1 forward to this point in the meeting. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been working hard to navigate our way through the challenges that COVID-19 has presented to us all. The City of Whittlesea is well aware of the impacts that this unprecedented global pandemic is having on our local community, on individuals, on families and businesses. Our goal is to continue delivering the critical services you need and provide some financial relief and support where we can. And I'd like to share with you a few of the measures we're taking immediately. We've recently provided an additional $50,000 to Whittlesea Community Connections to go directly to those impacted by COVID-19. This is in addition to our 10-year commitment to support this organisation in delivering services to improve the health, well-being and connectedness of residents across the municipality announced in 2018. Whittlesea Community Connections has a deep understanding of our community's needs and is best placed to provide support, whether that be through the provision of food and essential items or information and advice. Our contribution will provide direct support for hundreds of people in need. Tonight, Council's been asked to adopt the COVID-19 financial hardship policy. That new policy includes payment plans, deferral of rates, fees and charges, and holding interest until the 30th of June 2021. It's intended to provide support for those in our community who are having difficulty meeting everyday living expenses such as food, accommodation, clothing, healthcare and other basic necessities. If you're having difficulty, you can apply under this hardship policy for a payment plan tailored to your needs, or if you're experiencing serious financial hardship, we will consider an application to defer money owed, including rates, during this pandemic without incurring interest until the 30th of June 2021. This policy provides relief that is needed now, while also ensuring you do not incur further hardship once the pandemic is over. It also means that the City of Whittlesea can continue delivering essential services now and return at full strength once this challenging time is over. I strongly support the COVID-19 hardship policy, which rightfully goes beyond what we would normally do and provides relief for individuals and businesses who are finding it difficult to make ends meet because of this current pandemic. This assistance is complementary to the many initiatives that have already been announced by the federal and state governments. This community has faced challenges before, such as the tragic Black Saturday bushfires. At that time, properties and lives were lost and the community was devastated. The City of Whittlesea provided relief then. Now, the community needs help from the City of Whittlesea once more. This time, however, Council must go further in its financial support, as it's unlikely that many people will go unaffected by COVID-19 in some way. Experts are saying we might not see the light at the end of the dark tunnel for quite a time yet. This hardship policy is conservative and responsible in its approach. It ensures this council can still raise revenue through regular channels such as rates, fees and charges. However, it takes an empathetic approach to listening to what this community needs now, which is some relief during tough times. I'm also pleased to see that the relief extends out to the 30th of June in 2021, recognising that this situation is not a quick fix and devastating effects are likely to still be felt in 12 months' time. This is the first stage of our support to you. There'll be further announcements in the coming weeks as we continue to work with our community and key partners to understand what more we can do. Please heed the advice from government and stay home unless it's absolutely necessary for you to go out. Stay safe, stay healthy, and please look out for one another. I therefore resolve to adopt the COVID-19 financial hardship policy. And having dealt with that important business, I now resolve to resume standing orders. Officers, I haven't got a conflict of interest in relation to any item on the agenda. We now move to confirmation of the minutes, and I note that there are 6 sets of minutes to confirm as follows. The ordinary meeting of Council held on the 3rd of March 2020, the adjourned ordinary meeting of Council held on the 5th of March 2020, the adjourned ordinary meeting of Council held on the 10th of March 2020, the special meeting of Council held on the 16th of March 2020, the adjourned special meeting of Council held on the 23rd of March 2020, and finally the adjourned special meeting of Council held on the 26th of March 2020. I note that the first 4 sets of minutes predate my appointment as Administrator. Of those, 2 were purely adjournments by the Acting CEO where no meeting as such was held. The meeting on the 23rd of March, the day I was sworn into office, was also adjourned by the Acting CEO to the following Thursday. I've reviewed the minutes of the meeting held on Thursday the 26th of March and I'm satisfied that they're an accurate reflection of the meeting, and I will ensure that the minutes of this council meeting reflect the extraordinary situation in regard to the minutes of those previous meetings, and I hereby resolve to confirm the minutes of the adjourned special council meeting of the 26th of March. Manager Governance, are there any questions from the public?
Yes, Administrator. There are 8 questions from the public, which all relate to item 6.1.2 on the agenda, which is the use and development of land between Wedge Street and Campbell Road, Epping, for a car park.
Thank you. Matthew Navarrete and Fiona Powell of Epping have both asked questions relating to the community consultation process that has been undertaken in regards to the proposed new car park. Officers have advised that under sections 190 and 223 of the Local Government Act 1989, councils are only required to seek public submissions if a formal lease is being offered to an applicant for a period of 10 years or more, or if the rental exceeds $50,000 per annum. In this case, VicTrack and Council have agreed that a licence is the most appropriate type of agreement, as exclusive occupancy will not be granted, and the public, including adjoining land holdings, will be able to use the site for both parking and access purposes. Nevertheless, VicTrack has undertaken public consultation with adjoining landowners, and council officers are satisfied that none of the landowners' rights have been impeded, including adjoining landowners retaining access to their properties, improvements in security, including public lighting and access paths, restrictions in overflow parking with nature strips, appropriate traffic management conditions, and retention of open space provisions to compensate for the loss of use of Campbell Street Reserve. Council officers have been clear that the licence would only be issued on the basis that all design and construction conditions and public consultation processes have been satisfactorily addressed. Mr. Matthew Navarrete asked the following question: can it be a requirement that the entry to the proposed Campbell Street car park be constructed separately to the driveway for the existing 20 units, considering peak access will be required at the same time for residents and commuters? School traffic is already heavy and existing parking restrictions are ignored, which allows the current congestion and safety concerns in the streets. I've been advised that Council and VicTrack discussed various options during the design stage of Campbell Street Reserve parking area, including separate driveways. However, separate driveways would create a potential safety issue for vehicles and pedestrians and cause confusion for drivers. In addition, it would mean fewer car spaces would be available. An additional question is from Ms Fiona Powell, who asked, how is Council going to ensure that the public will not be able to use our private residential car park when the public car park is full? And if the proposed Epping Station car parks in Campbell Street are approved for construction? How will Council ensure rate-paying residents in Campbell Street, Epping's properties will be secure and their private car parks will not be used by the public? Officers have advised that the public car park will be clearly marked to identify that it's a public car park. Ms Powell also asked, regarding the proposed Epping Station car park in Campbell Street, Epping, how will Council ensure rate-paying residents in the area will continue to have access to their properties if construction goes ahead? Traffic management is a requirement where any construction disrupts road traffic. Residents are encouraged to report any unlawful parking to Council. And the final questions asked by Ms Powell are, quote, as a rate-paying resident who lives at 6 Campbell Street, Epping, I ask Council to ensure that our property is secured with protective fencing and gates to protect residents from public use of our properties. What is being offered as security at night for residents when the public will still have access to the car parks? I've been advised by the relevant department that landowners are encouraged to make sure that their property has fencing and gates that they believe is necessary to keep their properties private. I've also been advised that the car park design include improvements to security such as public lighting and access paths. Any unsociable behaviour that occurs should be reported to the Victoria Police. I note we have the following petitions. 5.2.1, request to provide compost bins or bokashi buckets to households in the city of Whittlesea. A petition from 100 signatories, including 86 residents, was received requesting Council to provide bokashi buckets and or compost bins to households in the city of Whittlesea. I'm advised that currently Council provides both compost bins and bokashi bins to residents at cost. A compost bin can be purchased from the council at a cost of $47 and a bokashi bin for $66. I'm further advised by officers that Council will commence a food organics and garden organics FOGO curbside collection service on the 1st of July 2020. This service will allow a resident with an opt-in garden waste bin to also place food waste into their garden bin to be composted and reused within the community, including at community gardens. I thank the petitioners for their interest in this matter and they will receive a letter outlining my response. I therefore resolve that Council receive and note the petition from 100 signatories, including 86 residents, requesting Council provide compost bins or bokashi buckets to households in the City of Whittlesea. I note that there is a second petition, 5.2.2, request of tree removal, Echuca Way, Epping. A petition was received from 26 residents requesting Council remove the gum trees along Echuca Way in Epping. I understand that Council has previously adopted a street tree management plan, and that plan sets out how requests such as this are to be handled, including consultation with residents in Echuca Way. Therefore, I resolve that Council receive the petition from 26 residents requesting Council remove the gum trees along Echuca Way, Epping, and that it be referred to officers for action under Council Street Tree Management Plan. Oh, my apologies. We now move to the business of the meeting, and I propose to make a minor change to the conduct of the meeting. I'll be asking the responsible executive to provide a brief overview of their report prior to my consideration of their recommendation. To the extent necessary, I therefore resolve to suspend standing orders to allow that to occur for each item in section 6 of the notice paper. Item 6.1.1, Amendment C 241 to the Whittlesea Planning Scheme, Council submission, and I ask the Director Partnerships, Planning and Engagement to provide an overview of the report.
Thank you, Administrator. This report seeks resolution from Council to provide a submission to the Victorian Planning Authority on the draft Shenstone Park Precinct Structure Plan, which is located within the North Growth Corridor between Wollert and Donnybrook. The submission seeks to provide in-principle support, seek clarification on particular matters, as well as identify opportunities for improvement. By way of background, the Shenstone Park Precinct Structure Plan covers an area of approximately 628 hectares, and the land uses proposed as part of that are for residential and employment land, as well as town centres, community uses, open space, conservation areas, and a transport network to support that future development. The plan at full development is expected to result in approximately 3,600 dwellings, over 10,000 residents, and approximately 4,500 new jobs. The PSP process has a bit of a history. It does date back to 2016 when it commenced, and it has worked its way through to a statutory exhibition period, which was provided by the VPA between October and November 2019. A total of 30 submissions were received by the VPA, and whilst Council is not the planning authority for this amendment, Council will be responsible for implementing the subsequent planning approvals and the infrastructure contribution plan. And as such, it is important for Council to provide a submission to this amendment. Council's submission is proposed to address the key strategic issues within the report, the detailed list of issues identified in the review of the planning scheme amendment documentation, and a preliminary response to other submissions made to the VPA. And in summary, these will include supporting the positive aspects of the PSP around employment, provision of community infrastructure, sporting reserves and requirements pertaining to the retention of 80% of all river red gums, supporting the inclusion of social and affordable housing measures, seeking clarification on the extractive industries expansion area and the buffers, as well as the utility facility owned by Yarra Valley Water. There are some other minor suggestions and clarification being sought as part of the submission. Ultimately, the final decision on the amendment will be made by the VPA, and they will take into account all submissions prior to submitting to the Minister for Planning. The VPA may propose additional changes which may impact on Council's position, It is anticipated that once the VPA submit the amendment to the Minister will recommend a planning panel be convened to hear submissions and make recommendations on each outstanding issue, which is likely to occur later this year. Thank you, Administrator.
Thank you for that overview, Director. I do actually have a couple of questions for the Acting CEO as follows. My first question is that I note that the exhibition period for this amendment was between the 10th of October and the 15th of November, a relatively short period of time, and I just wanted to know whether you considered that that was sufficient time for submitters.
Thank you for the question, Administrator. I'll call upon the Director of Partnerships, Planning and Engagement to provide a response.
Thank you, Administrator. Generally, amendments are exhibited for 1 month or 28 days. This particular amendment is quite significant in scale and size, and there have been a number of submitters, including Council, who sought a longer period. The VPA was accommodating and allowed the extension of submissions, and it's also noted that there was extensive preliminary consultation undertaken with stakeholders and other authorities.
Thank you for that clarification. And I have a second question, which really relates to the submissions received in relation to the proposed amendment. There's many references in the Council Officer response column indicating that the particular issue is a responsibility of another authority, such as the Victorian Planning Authority, the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Yarra Valley Water or some other party. Can you please outline what's the mechanism to ensure that a response is actually provided?
Sure thing. So the comments noted in the officer's report are in reference to all submissions, and they are the submissions made obviously during the exhibition period. So it's the responsibility of the VPA to consider all of those submissions and provide responses and ensure that that those parties are part of the process, including any potential planning panel that will take place. The response table has been provided within the report to ensure that the VPA is of the understanding of Council's position on those other parties' responses.
Okay. Thank you. So having heard the overview from the Director of Partnerships, Planning and Engagement, and having read the report and considered the response to the questions I've posed to the Acting CEO at the meeting, I agree with the recommendations in the agenda papers, but with the addition of a point 5 to read as follows. The new point 5 is a further memorandum to be provided to the Administrator to outline the status of issues raised in Council's submission prior to the commencement of the planning panel, and I'll ask officers to project the entire motion, including the new point 5. And with that change to the officer recommendation, they are adopted. Thank you. Item 6.1.2, Wedge Street and Campbell Street Road Reserves adjoining 16 Davison Street, Epping, use and development of the land for a car park. And again, I ask the Director of Partnerships, Planning and Engagement to provide an overview of that report.
Thank you, Administrator. This is an application to use and develop the land for a car park with a total of 64 car spaces at the termination of Campbell and Wedge Streets within the 2 existing road reserves to service commuters travelling to and from Epping Station. Car park's located approximately 100 metres from Epping Station, connected by an existing footpath that runs along the western edge of Campbell Street Reserve and the retaining wall of the rail line. The site is located within the Epping Central Metropolitan Activity Centre, and the application seeks to support this hub and provide parking for transport services. The car parking is targeted at users of the station to further facilitate the use of public transport for longer distance trips, typically into the city and to work, and is in response to the low levels of parking currently provided around the Epping station. So the project is part of a larger scheme of station car park upgrades proposed for key metropolitan regional stations across Victoria, with the intent to ease congestion around those car parks, but also where cars are moving on further, as well as to improve security, provide lighting, access to stations and accessible car parks. So advertising of this application did occur in accordance with the Planning Environment Act and resulted in 2 objections being received. Concerns included decrease in property values, commuter car parking should be on main roads, impacts on emergency service vehicle access, increased traffic and impacts on traffic safety, increases in rates, crime, lack of provision for bicycle parking, and also a reduction in green space and removal of trees. Officers have taken all of those concerns into account and are making a recommendation to support the application, and that is seeking resolution that a notice of decision be granted, subject to appropriate conditions on any future planning permit. Thank you.
Again, thank you to the Director Partnerships Planning and Engagement for the overview. And again, I do have a couple of questions for the Acting CEO. And the questions are both in a similar theme to those that were asked during public question time. So my first question is whether you could please outline the consultation processes which were undertaken with affected residents and objectors by both Council and VicTrack, and you have partially answered that question already.
Thank you for the question, Administrator, and I will call upon the Director of Partnerships and Engagement Planning to provide a response.
Thank you. So the planning consultation undertaken is a formal statutory process that is undertaken and allows people to object. In addition to that process, VicTrack, who are the applicants for the permit, undertook their own consultation, and that was typically carried out throughout November last year. Included station pop-ups and handouts, door knocking, face-to-face meetings, online surveys, use of social media, and some other media releases and the like. What will typically happen with applications where there are objections is that planning officers will then subsequently get in contact with objectors. It can be a little bit ad hoc and occurs at different stages of the process. In this particular stage, it occurred later in the process, but there was a conversation held as well with those objecting.
Thank you for that information. And my second question is about whether there'll be any screening or buffer landscaping where there are the adjacent residences.
So in the attachments to the application of the council report, there is a high-level landscape plan shown, which does provide green buffer areas surrounding most of the sites. If not all of the components, except where there are access ways and footpaths and the like. One of the conditions proposed to be included is to provide more detail in that space, and that will provide us details of the landscaping that would subsequently be planted, and that can then be enforced by council.
Thank you. So having heard again the overview from the Director Partnerships Planning and Engagement, and obviously comprehensively going through the report and the responses that have been given this evening, I agree with the recommendations in the agenda papers and they are adopted. Item 6.1.3, Australian Local Government Association, ALGA, Notices of Motion for the National General Assembly 2020 NGA. And again, if I could call on the Director of Partnerships Planning and Engagement to provide an overview of that report.
Thank you, Administrator. So this report seeks resolution from Council to endorse some motions to put forward to the ALGA board, and they relate to reinstatement of the National Rental Affordability Scheme, and also sports gambling advertising. So these are at a federal level, quite closely aligned with our advocacy program, where council has been advocating for both affordable housing and homelessness for some time, as well as the reinstatement of the National Rental Affordability Scheme, and that has formed part of our budget submissions for the last couple of years.
Thank you, Director. I note there's still some uncertainty around whether the General Assembly will actually be conducted and how, but nonetheless I think it's important for Council to put forward motions on matters of importance to our city and the sector more broadly. So having heard your overview and considered the report, I agree with the recommendations in the agenda papers and they are adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6.2.1, provision of delivered meals service. I note that the report for this item has been withdrawn under clause 33 of the Procedural Matters Local Law. The item has been withdrawn in order to allow for further discussion around the tender, and the report is proposed to be presented to the 5th of May Council meeting. Therefore, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 6.2.2, City of Whittlesea Multicultural Policy, and I ask the Director Community Services to provide an overview of the report.
Thank you, Administrator. Tonight we will present you with the City of Whittlesea Multicultural Policy for endorsement. This policy is an affirmation of Council's ongoing commitment to the multicultural community it serves. The policy ensures Council recognises and respects the rights of people to maintain their cultural heritage and identity, and delivers programs which respond to the local needs and supports equitable access to services and facilities for people from culturally diverse backgrounds. Administrator, this policy is informed through extensive consultation with our community and relevant stakeholders, including community members, local service representatives, and internal and external networks. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Having heard that overview and obviously having considered comprehensively the report that you've provided, and noting in particular the extensive consultation that has occurred in relation to this really important policy, I agree with the recommendations in the agenda papers and they are adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6.3.1, 2019 to 99, upgrade of Cooks Road construction tender evaluation report, and I ask the Director City Transport and Presentation to provide an overview of this report.
Thank you, Administrator. This report asks to accept the tender submitted by MACA Infrastructure for the sum of $739,970 for the purpose of upgrade of Cooks Road and Bridge Inn Road intersection. The purpose of contract is to upgrade Cooks Road from the Bridge Inn intersection to the Costa Mushroom Farm. It is a partnership between state government, council, and the local business Costa Mushroom Farm to seal the unsealed road of about 550 metres for the purpose of improving local road and support local business. Thank you.
Thank you to the Director, City Transport and Presentation. I particularly note the important upgrading work, the fact that it is the partnership project supporting local business, and I agree with the recommendations in the agenda papers and they are adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6.3.2, 2019 to 127, installation of traffic signals, Yan Yin Road and Hazel Glen Drive, Doreen tender evaluation report, and again I ask the Director, City Transport and Presentation to provide an overview on this report.
Thank you, Administrator. Again, this is another tender evaluation report asking Council to accept the tender from Fortunato Group for the sum of $700,168.50 for the purpose of installation of traffic signals at the intersection of Yan Yan Road and Hazel Glen Drive, Doreen. This particular intersection is an accident black spot with 6 casualty crashes in the 5 years between 2013 and 2017, all of which related to uncontrolled right-hand turn at that intersection. So again, it's a partnership between council and the state government to address the high incident because by installing the signal is considered a very effective way to reduce and control the road safety.
Thank you to the Director, City Transport and Presentation. And again, having considered the report and your overview, but importantly, again, the partnership approach and the fact that it is an accident black spot, I agree with the recommendations in the agenda papers and they're adopted.
Thank you.
Item 6.3.3, 2019-133, evaluation of the state purchasing contract TPAMS 2025 for the implementation, maintenance and support of a cloud-based telephony solution. And again, I ask the Director, City Transport and Presentation to provide an overview of this report.
Thank you, Administrator. This is a service contract asking Council to accept a tender from Multicultural Networks Corporation for the sum of $2,972,924.67 to provide services of implementation, maintenance and support of a cloud-based telephony system for the 10-year period from 1st of August 2020 to 31st of July 23. Please note that with the initial 3-year fixed with flexible 7 single-year extensions available, and the contract sum is for the total 10 years. By way of background, Council's short-tail phone system was initially implemented in 2009 and is currently reaching the end of the life due to the discontinuation of ISDN services across Australia and replaced by NBN. The short-tail system is an on-premise solution requiring service pieces of hardware to be installed, housed, and maintained on site, along with telecommunication services such as ISDN services or SIP lines. In keeping in line with the Council's IT and digital strategy, it is proposed to replace existing on-premise system with a cloud-based solutions. We are proposing to join the state purchasing contract, TPAM 2025, which is a panel contract arrangement approved by the Minister for Local Government under Section 186 5C of the Local Government Act 1989. City of Whittlesea Tender Evaluation Panel assessed the offers of 3 leading service providers under this panel and made the recommendation to select Multicultural Networks Corporation.
Thank you, Director, City Transport and Presentation, for that very comprehensive overview of this particular report and for having responded to the questions I previously had posed to the Acting CEO. I agree with the recommendations in the agenda papers and they are adopted.
Thank you.
Item 6.3.4, 2016-186, Concrete Construction and Reinstatement Works Extension Report. And again, I ask the Director, City Transport and Presentation to provide an overview of this report.
Thank you, Administrator. This report seeks Council to extend a current contract for concrete construction and reinspect works for another year with additional amount of $3,250,000. Council has commenced this contract as of 1st of July 2017 and finishing the initial term of 3 years as of 30th of June 2020. The contract has 2 one-year extension options for 2020 and 21 and 2022. This report is recommending to extend by 1 year to allow officers to prepare for a collaborative tender for the next stage.
Thank you, Director, City Transport and Presentation. And having heard your overview and obviously considered the report, I agree with the recommendation in the agenda papers and they are adopted.
Thank you.
Item 6.4.1, Council Action Plan 2019-20. This is a progress update Q2. And if I could ask the Director Corporate Services to provide an overview of this report.
Thank you, Administrator. This report asks for Council to note the progress of the 1920 Council Action Plan. The 1920 Council Action Plan has identified 28 major initiatives to be delivered. This report provides an update on the Q2 milestones, which are for the period October to December 2019. Council achieved 30 out of 36 milestones allocated in Q2, or 83%. At the time of report writing, it was expected that all major initiatives would be achieved by 30 June 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic has placed at risk the delivery of some major initiatives. As such, I would like to propose an alternate recommendation to this report.
Thank you, Director Corporate Services. I also noted that this is a report for the second quarter ending in December 2019, and clearly things have changed associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so the alternative, the additional motion that we'd like to adopt is that Council resolves to note that the progress detailed in this report was correct as at the 31st of December 2019, but delivery of all milestones has since been impacted by COVID-19. And secondly, an updated progress report as at the 31st of March 2020 will be provided at the 5th of May Council meeting. Thank you. Item 6.4.2, unconfirmed minutes of Audit and Risk Committee meeting. And again, if I could ask the Director Corporate Services to provide an overview of this report.
Thank you. This report asks for Council to note the unconfirmed minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 5th of March 2020. For background information, Council has an Audit and Risk Committee which meets quarterly and includes 3 independent members. The Audit and Risk Committee Charter requires the minutes of each meeting to be provided to Council. As provided in the report, a number of items were discussed at the March meeting. An example of some of these items include the Audit and Risk Committee Work Plan, a Q2 financial report, Risk Management Report and Cyber Security Report. A number of other items were also discussed and these are detailed in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you to the Director Corporate Services. This recommendation is really relating to the adoption of the unconfirmed minutes, and I concur with the recommendation in the agenda paper and they are adopted. Thank you. Item 6.4.3, Capital Management Policy, and again if I could call on the Director Corporate Services to provide an overview on this report.
Thank you. This report is recommending that Council resolve to endorse the Capital Management Policy. Capital management was first discussed with councillors during the 2019-20 budget discussions, and officers presented a proposal of the operational framework of a capital management approach to councillors at a briefing on the 9th of July 2019. Councillors supported the development of a capital management policy. This policy has been developed to establish a framework to assess the suitability of investment and funding options to ensure financial efficiency is maximised while minimising risk. Implementing a capital management approach can save council funds significantly over the long term. Developing a clear and concise methodology will ensure that any risk is mitigated, and clear guidelines will ensure there is rigour when assessing the most appropriate funding options available. This policy was presented to the Audit and Risk Committee on the 5th of March and was endorsed to be presented to Council tonight. Thank you.
Thank you to the Director of Corporate Services. I note that the Audit and Risk Committee had previously endorsed this particular policy, and that it is a very important policy, obviously, for Council's financial sustainability. And so I agree with the recommendation in the agenda papers, and they're adopted. Thank you.
Administrator.
Item 6.5.2, Assemblies of Councillors, 7th of April 2020. And if I could ask the Acting Chief Executive Officer to provide an overview of this report.
Thank you, Administrator. The report provided to Council is the record of assemblies of councillors prepared in accordance with Section 80A(2) of the Local Government Act 1989. This report records the assemblies of councillors for the period 10 February to 2 March 2020 and is submitted to Council for noting.
Thank you, Acting Chief Executive Officer. I agree with the recommendation in the agenda papers, and they are adopted. Item 6.5.3, Appointment of Interim Administrator, Representation on Organisations and Committees. And again, if I could ask the Acting Chief Executive Officer to provide an overview of the report.
Thank you, Administrator. The report presented sets out the details of organisations and committees identified as requiring Council representation by the Interim Administrator for the period until 21 June 2020. The report further identifies those organisations and committees whereby representation from Council will be by officers for the next 3 months. In the case of all organisations and committees identified, appointments to these are to be further reviewed upon the subsequent commencement of the panel of administrators. Administrator, this report is submitted for resolution.
Thank you, Acting Chief Executive Officer. I'm very conscious that it's important for Council to be represented on a range of committees and organisations, whether they're local government industry-based, such as the Municipal Association of Victoria, or more community-focused, such as Whittlesea Community Connections. I would like to add another body that I will join to represent the Council, and that is the Whittlesea Community Futures, a very important network of community support providers across the municipality. As you indicated earlier, in the coming months, the state government will appoint a panel of administrators, and Council can again review these appointments. And this will include making appointments to committees and organisations that will be represented by officers in the coming months. So, having heard the overview that you have provided and read the report and considered the various organisations and committees, plus the addition of representation on Whittlesea Community Futures, I agree with the recommendations in the agenda papers, and they are adopted. I note that I have not listed any notices of motion for tonight's meeting, but I have been advised by the Acting Chief Executive Officer that there are 2 matters to be introduced as items of urgent business. The first relates to Contract 2020-19 Food Waste Benchtop Bin and Liners Supply and Distribution Tender Evaluation, and I resolve to admit the item as urgent business. Urgent business item contract 2020-19 food waste benchtop bin and liners supply and distribution tender evaluation. And if I could ask the Director, City Transport and Presentation to provide an overview of the report.
Thank you, Administrator, for allowing this item to be a late urgent business item. The purpose of this report is to seek Council to approve the tender from Source Separation System for the sum of $637,350 for the purpose of food waste benchtop bin and liners supply and distribution. This is a part of our FOGO initiative. By way of background, about 40% of Whittlesea's household garbage are either food or garden waste. If we can divert this 40%, we could reduce greenhouse emission by close to 42,000 tonnes per annum, which has the same effect of removing 9,000 cars off-road. So it's an initiative with significant environmental significance. It is August 2019 Council meeting. Council resolved to introduce a trial of the FOGO recycling collection covering 1,600 properties in 4 areas: Thomastown, Laylaw, Munda, Doreen, and Mill Park. That commenced in October 2019. At its council meeting of February 2020, following at the conclusion of the trial, Council has further resolved to introduce a municipal FOGO initiative from 1st of July 2020 with opt-in methodology. So this particular contract is to allow Council to procure 43,500 benchtop caddies and 45,000 rolls of compostable liners delivered to residents. The caddies will be delivered as part of the municipal-wide opt-in food garden organic rollout to residents that have a garden waste bin. The contract was tendered following MAV vendor panel advertisement seeking EOI. Tender of the contract closed at the end of February, as the tender price and the sum of the tender evaluation is attached for your consideration and is a very exciting project for the municipality.
Thank you, Director, City Transport and Presentation. This is obviously a very important initiative with significant environmental benefits, and I agree with the recommendations in the agenda papers, and they are adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second item of urgent business relates to the council meeting schedule for the remainder of 2020, and I again resolve to admit the item as urgent business. The 2020 council meeting cycle, and I ask the acting CEO to provide an overview of the report.
Thank you, Administrator. I will refer to the Manager of Governance for the details for the time of those meetings.
Thank you, Administrator. Primarily in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that council meetings for the foreseeable future will be conducted primarily by live streaming, it is proposed that council resolve to change the start time for council meetings from the May meeting through to and including the October meeting to 3 p.m. and also to not proceed with the 4th of November special council meeting, which was originally scheduled post the intended elections, where the new council would have been sworn in and a mayor elected, and with the council having been dismissed and elections not due in this municipality until 2024, that meeting in November is no longer required. And there's a motion being projected now to that effect.
Thank you, Manager Governance. Obviously, given our current coronavirus circumstances, I agree with the recommendation in the agenda papers and they are adopted. Officers, I now resolve to close the meeting to the public under Section 89 of the Local Government Act 1989 for consideration of confidential items.